So, welcome back, everyone. We are so excited. This is a second edition, a special edition, a sports podcast that draws from a note from Dr. Court. And I started this series really just to encourage additional research on a variety of different topics. And so I thought that we would really dive into sports today, speaking about maybe trends, different types of innovation, specifically, of course, technology, AI that's really infiltrating sports right now, as well as youth sports. What's happening in youth sports? And so we are so excited to be here today. I have three other colleagues that have joined in this particular podcast episode. So grateful, beginning with Dr. Toby Brooks out of Baylor University, and then Dr. Rick Eckstein out of Villanova University, and Dr. David Zine from Lander University. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to open up the floor, beginning with Dr. Brooks. If you can maybe provide your own introduction and background of yourself.
Yeah, sure. It's an honor to be here. Thanks so much, Courtney. And it's great to make some new connections. As Dr. Beck said, I am at Baylor University, where I've been for the past 2 years, spent the previous 15 years at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center, in addition to being a sports dad, now empty nester. So kind of walked through the youth sports thing with my own kids. I've also been active with the International Youth Conditioning Association, authored several books there. And today I'm a sports scientist and exercise physiologist, and always interested in looking at how we can optimize training and how we can put the fun back into youth sports.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Brooks. And we will shift over to Dr. Rick Eckstein.
Well, yeah, I like that about putting the fun back into youth sports to see if we can figure that out in the next hour. Courtney, thanks as always for the opportunity to chat and meet other people. I'm a professor of sociology at Villanova University. I've been there for about 35 years. I've more recently got interested in studying youth and college sports, especially girls and women's sports. I wrote a book about 7 years ago now with an update trying to connect college sports and youth sports in sort of pipeline model that I developed. Currently, I am co-producing and research director of a 4-part documentary called Beyond Stigma, Mental Health in Women's College Sports. It is in the hands of, let's say, a national broadcasting company, a non-for-profit national broadcasting company, and we're waiting to hear when it's going to air, hopefully sometime in this decade, or actually hopefully this year sometime. So we're excited about that. And one of the episodes is dedicated to how stress and anxiety and college athletes has its roots and foundation in the world of youth sports.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Eckstein. And we will shift over to Dr. David Zine.
Hi, Courtney. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here. It's a pleasure. David Zen. I am from Lander University in South Carolina. I just wrapped up my 5th year teaching the sport management program there. Also served as the NCAA faculty athletic representative over the last few years. Came into teaching about 12 years ago at the college level after about 16 years at small college athletics as a women's basketball coach and an athletic director. And I'm starting to wind down my days as a sport dad. Got a rising senior right now that will wrap things up in my sport fatherhood.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for that introduction. I really do. I want to dive right into these questions. Youth sports in particular, I'd like to kind of start there. And I've been getting questions just in general about youth sports, whether it's travel ball, the cost behind it, but then also too, like Dr. Eckstein was even mentioning, just the pressure, the stress. And I think it could honestly be on both sides, not only the athlete, but even the parents, the commitment to travel, the time, the effort spent. So I'd like to just open this discussion to, generally speaking, youth sports. We could just like I said, just have a conversation about this, whoever would like to start with it.
I'll kick it off. Courtney, in deference to your background as a gymnast, I think gymnastics is perhaps the one exception in many ways because it does teach a lot of movement skills that could really be beneficial later on. I think the early specialization in sport has been really an epidemic and not a good one. You see 10-year-olds with hitting instructors and pitching coaches, and that's fine and well, but they're not learning multilateral athletic development, things that could serve them better later in life. Can those skills translate over into playing pickleball when you're an undergrad, or playing tennis, or becoming a recreational jogger, whatever? So what I see as kind of the professionalization of sports and the early specialization really kind of sucks the fun out. And for a lot of young athletes, it professionalizes it in a way that developmentally they're not ready for. Physically, we know the overuse injury rate is dramatically higher. You look at things like Tommy John surgery for young pitchers that have 5, sometimes 10x as high as rates of the past. Uh, Competitive soccer players. I've been in circles where young female athletes don't think they're serious about soccer until they've had their first ACL. That's the culture of the sport. And so, what I really love to do through my platform and increasingly through my former students is really just train a love for movement. And that's the solution to our hypokinetic disease problem later in life. You know, our healthcare system would be dramatically better if we had PE, if we had actual learning how to move your body, understanding how to move your body in space, as opposed to going to volleyball lessons, or as opposed to going to an elite soccer camp, things like that. So that's kind of the soapbox that I tend to stand on most frequently.
No, thank you so much for that, Dr. Brooks. And I think what's interesting that you mentioned even physical education. I just got off of a podcast talking about that with some schools, of course, like just even a reduction of physical education, or it's simply not quite fitting into the curriculum. And I think, like you mentioned, just the general movement later on in life, it could certainly benefit any individuals.
Let me just piggyback on what Toby was saying and add a couple layers to what the problem is. What we found, both the research from my book and now through the documentary, is that parents are really driving this. And it's a sense, well, parents are driving this and the industry is driving this. And parents, we've found, are judging themselves as good parents by how much they can provide their kids in the world of youth sports. Do they have the best equipment? Are they playing on the best teams? And they measure themselves against each other. And the irony sometimes is that the parents know that this is a lost cause, and so they're almost like drug addicts. They cannot help themselves, and they cannot wait till their next fix. And the kids are just sort of hapless in here. But the industry and the business model is, as Toby said, press a specialization at an early age, all year play, no downtime, no rest time. And now we've got private equity coming into the youth sports world, which is probably going to exacerbate some of these trends that we've been seeing, putting profits of these private equity companies ahead of anything, further increasing the kind of barriers faced by low-income families or families who live in areas where there aren't fields or there aren't facilities to use. So there's so much there's so much to worry about in the youth sports world, and in my mind, a lot of the fuel for that is coming from intercollegiate sports because they encourage that model by attending the so-called showcase tournaments, things like that, which the youth sports industry is geared toward. So my view is that the colleges stop coming to those tournaments. If they go back to the old way of recruiting at high schools or just not recruiting at all, which is something I've put out in print, the youth sports world would then evolve into something I think a little more on the lines of what Toby was talking about, focusing more on fun and friendship, participation, rather than the 1,200 national championships that you could get in the world of youth soccer.
That is so true. And just beginning at such a young age, I really do think that there's so much value in holding that sense of fun because that really does carry the athlete through as far as even when it does get more challenging. And so 100%, it's really evolving right now. And Dr. Zen would love to hear your input on youth sports.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. There's great value in play, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that. Ironically, the emphasis on competition doesn't necessarily turn out the greatest athletes anyway, because I don't know when kids have an opportunity to go practice. You're playing an NBA season in the middle of 3 months in summer youth basketball. My kid's going to play in a softball tournament this weekend 7 times over the next 4 days. So I don't know what kind of practice time, sometimes that you develop from those sort of things. And then there's the mental aspect as well. I did a study abroad in Taiwan a few years ago, and we had the opportunity to just hang out with some Olympic level badminton players. And all they knew since the time they were two was badminton. And we asked them, just how much are you going to continue when you can't compete at this level? And to a person, they said, the second my career is over, I'll never touch another racket again, because that was just all that they had known, and they were done at the age of 18. So I think there's a mental aspect to it as well.
Absolutely. And I think my follow-up question is what do you all believe that maybe organizations could do at this youth sports level, these youth leagues? Like, I don't know. I mean, even like kind of creative thinking, but like scholarship, like additional scholarship opportunities for the financial aspect for parents to be able to have that access for their kids. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll start off on that. Hearing Dr. Eckstein's note that private equity is entering the equation is horrifying. Frankly, the money has changed the industry. I mean, you look at a movie like The Sandlot; it's just neighborhood kids getting together to play, and I get it. Like having tackle twill uniforms and traveling all over, that's exciting, right? And I get that. But I saw it with my own son. We kept him out of competitive travel baseball as long as we could, but it reached a point where at 14, there were no more community leagues. He had to play travel ball. And so we would drive 6 hours to play a team from our own town. And it's like, this is absolute insanity. And then along with that, you've got the fact that these are our athletes who are sometimes being shamed if they are, if they're going to play on their high school basketball team, they're not committed to their travel baseball team. And so I've long thought, and I don't know how to make this happen, but if communities could pull together a youth sports league, a true youth sports league where young athletes could sign up and actually participate around the year in varying seasonal sports, if we could all kind of get over ourselves and our own specialties, like I'm a basketball guy, but neither of my kids played basketball. I just want them to learn to love to move. And so if they're in a league that exposes them to soccer for a couple months and baseball or softball for a couple months and basketball for a couple, like that would be so much better. But we just refuse to see past our own little sport bubble. And it's the athletes that suffer in the process.
No, excellent points. And I'd like to open it up to Dr. Eckstein, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there used to be. I don't know if I'm the oldest person here, but probably. So there was a time when what Toby was talking about existed. At least it's not ubiquitously. It was more available through townships. They would have year-round recreational ball, and some, it was mildly competitive. It wasn't just people showing up and doing cartwheels, but it hadn't reached the level that it's getting now. And townships increasingly, because they're pressed, their budgets are pressed, they are welcoming these outside companies. These, let's say, I know my world is soccer more than softball and baseball. So these soccer clubs will offer townships quite a bit of money for use of public space. And that denies just the community from using that space for, say, just playing pickup, because they've got all these travel teams now who have paid to use the space, and the municipalities need the resource, they need the money. Unfortunately, if they wanted to now go and use that to buttress the recreation programs, they have no fields, right? They've already sold the fields, so it's kind of they're in a no-win situation here, and those families and those young men and women who are looking for something that's not top shelf, that's not $10,000 a year, that doesn't require traveling all over the country. It's just not there. It's just not there. It's not available. And I think when parents are faced with that, they go with what's there. And they end up spending too much money. And now we're witnessing people who we interviewed for the documentary, their families are coming apart, and over youth sports, and it's shocking and it's horrifying because it really should be fun, and it's not. It's almost anything but fun right now.
That is so true, Dr. Eckstein. I mean, I think about even the stories back in my gymnastics days where literally families were pulled apart, where like the mother and the daughter would live in an apartment just to train at a very high level gym. And you hope that it works out, that it pans out. But if it doesn't, if there's an injury, I mean, just think about all the effort, the time, the money spent. It has to be hard, I think, on both sides, parents and athletes. So thank you for that insight. And Dr. Zen.
No, I would agree with both of these gentlemen. The lack of play, the lack of fun, particularly early on, is disappointing and it's disheartening. To see parents in particular taking things so seriously, to see the kids reflect that. Um, I do think there is, or at least should be, an opportunity for anybody to play at a level that they want to play at. My daughter made the decision a few years ago that she wanted to move from rec ball into travel ball because she wanted to take it that seriously. And but that was her call. That was not a push that we made or anything like that. If I want to play basketball, there's places for me to go play basketball. It's the NBA is not it. But there are places for us to go out and to participate in sports. And I do think that we, as you were just talking about, we put that emphasis too early. When I'm talking to the parents of a 5-year-old and they're talking about their speed coach and their nutritionist and their weight trainer, at the age of 5, to each their own. But I think it's unfortunate in the world of sports.
Very true. Excellent points there, Dr. Zen. And I would love to transition into maybe just like the collegiate arena, professional for that matter. But what particular business trends do you feel are actually reshaping collegiate sports and professional sports? And maybe at the administrative level, things that that administrators should be more mindful of right now. So just want to open that discussion up.
I'll start on that as well. My son was an all-state baseball player, and as a senior coming out, he had not a lot of options. I mean, the transfer portal and at the time, the Wild West rules for unlimited transfers and NIL had really obliterated high school recruiting, and nobody came to high school games to recruit. They would go to these showcase events, and I get it, especially if you're at a small small budget small school. Why would I find a private school in Lubbock, Texas, when I can go to, and there may be one or two players that can play at the collegiate level, when I could go to a showcase and, presumably half or more are potential signees, right? And so for high school athletes in particular, who aren't playing club sports, it kind of flies in the face of everything I was just saying, because I know it's better. But even as a parent, I recognize that if all my kids do is play high school sports, they're probably not going to get recruited. They're going to have to go, unless they're an elite talent, they're going to need to go either to a junior college or a lower level NAIA or Division two or three, and hopefully put up some stats, and then they'll make that way to that higher level. So here at Baylor, I mean, Big 12, it's not elite of elite, but it's high level Power Four. These athletes probably don't have that story. Or if they're late transfers, maybe that was their story. They were a late bloomer or something like that. But the industry and the rules have really just kind of lost their mind. And it's made it really discouraging for parents and for athletes, because that pathway to a scholarship is not as clear cut as just play on your high school sports team, put up good stats, and somebody will find you. It's become something people can sell. And these recruiting services have popped up, and former coaches, kind of speak into that. And, you know, not every one of those athletes probably realistically has a chance to play collegiately. But if there's a service available and a parent can buy in, you almost feel negligent if you're not trying to give your child that advantage when their teammate has it. And so there's really a pressure. And I felt it as a parent. Like, if I'm not doing this for my kid, but his teammate is or her teammate is, then man, maybe it almost looks like I don't love my kid as much. And that's a bad place for a parent to be when you know in your heart that something's better, but you feel pressure from the outside to make it improve.
Excellent points, though. And Dr. Eckstein, your thoughts?
One of the things I found through all these years of research is how little parents and families understand about the world of scholarships and how few scholarships there really are out there. And in sports like baseball, the top of that Division I school had about 11 scholarships to divide 30 or 40 players. Parents don't know it. Parents think that every single athlete that they see on TV and that they hear about is on a full scholarship. I think admissions advantages have almost replaced scholarships as a focus for a lot of, especially higher income families. That's a way. It's a back door into getting into a certain college that you may not have the credentials for academically. But the pressure that Toby's talking about is so real that parents really are comparing themselves with each other. What I think I'd like to see is a little more attention paid to the other options for playing college sports. And then, Courtney, you and I talked about this on the podcast. There's a lot of fun to be had in Division II and Division III. There's a lot of fun to be had in the lower levels of Division I. And truth be told, given the world of scholarships, you're only going to get a partial scholarship anyway. So, and would you rather, would a high school person going to college rather sit on the bench on a national championship baseball team or soccer team, or play on a mediocre Division III team? It's all a matter of what's important. And I think we've narrowed the view of what we consider important. That is being able to brag that our kids are either playing Division I or on scholarship, rather than allowing them to go and play another 3 or 4 years if that's what they want. And I think those people who get to play in a less stressed environment, and I don't want to romanticize Division III because there's plenty of problems there too. But those are the ones I think that are gonna carry on and play continually as adults, like we all have done, I think. We're sitting here today because things were different when we were doing it sports and when we were playing college sports, if we were to continue to play later on in our lives. But I don't remember if David or Toby before said that run into these young adults who never want to touch. David, it was you with the badminton, right? They never want to hold a racket again. That's what first got me interested in this when I had students coming up, almost all women, saying, once I'm done, Dr. Bird, once I'm done, I don't want to see a basketball again. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to smell it. I don't want to go near the basketball court. I'm through. It just drained every ounce of fun out of it being involved in these pipelines. High pressure world of common sports where nobody really cares if the field hockey team is winning the division. Nobody cares. But we act like it's the most important thing in the world.
Excellent points. And I really like how you highlighted just the narrative that is being spoken about with Division II, Division III, that, the majority of the time, I mean, even that love for the sport to be able to carry it on, I think that's a really big point. And I'm glad that Dr. Zen mentioned that, is that idea that you don't want to just be done with sport. Like, unfortunately for gymnastics, I kind of have to be done in a way. I mean, I know there's some, gymnasts that go on after college. But I really do. I think that's a very good point that you make, Dr. Eckstein, of just the overall narrative that could, eventually be spoken to encourage athletes to move forward, even if it is like D2 and D3 as well. So, Dr. Zinn, would love to hear your insights.
Yeah, Dr. Exton kind of stole a page out of my recruiting handbook. Back when I was coaching D2 and D3, was that was our sell. Is why I sit on the bench for a partial scholarship. You can come here, you can play, you can have the great experience, you can get an education. You don't have that pressure and all those other sorts of things. The D1 does hold a lot of cachet still. A lot of parents want to be able to say, my kid's on a Division I scholarship, even if all that means is books. You don't have to say that at the country club. So that there still is a big pull to that, but the small college does offer a lot of unique experiences, and I didn't really realize that until I started coaching small college. Um, that said, we even feel it today with the portal. We have a lot of the kids that'll go into the portal just to put a toe in, see what happens. the Division II level, the vast majority of those students end up staying right where they're at. Very few of them actually transfer, but they're going to put it out there just to see if a D1 will pick them up, because we see those success stories. Just in the baseball tournament, the World Series, a couple of D2 guys are out there throwing in Omaha, and that says to just about every D2 kid out there, hey, I can do that too. So uh, D2 schools and D3 do have to fight against that pull a little bit. And Dr. Brooks is absolutely right about the blurry recruitment now. Parents and high school coaches, youth coaches, AAU coaches, they really don't understand the process anymore. When I heard recently a Hall of Fame coach said, we don't recruit high school kids anymore. They rely strictly on the portal because you've proven yourself someplace. It makes sense, but it really is kind of a struggle for everybody to figure out how to manage the process at this point.
Wonderful points. And I would love to transition into innovation and technology. So, what particular innovations are truly solving real problems right now in sport at any level?
I feel selfish going first, so I'm going to play the Uno reverse card here, and I'll go last this time.
Tough one. I'm in the middle regardless, so it doesn't matter.
I, I'm glad that I didn't have to worry so much about analytics when I was coaching. Where everybody can kind of take the data and look at the screen, and the sportscaster says this says you're supposed to go for it on 4th and 4, and you fire the coach if they punt. We use data, but not to that level. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. But the analytics have changed the game significantly, whether it's recruiting or when you need to recover, or the amount of sleep that you're getting, or whatever the case may be. The technology in sport is tremendous. Yet I gave a presentation not that long ago. 100 years after Jesse Owens, we're really not all that much faster. We're less than a second faster in the 100 than we were 100 years ago running on a cinder track. So sometimes I wonder if we don't just get too cute with some of the stuff that we use. Anyway.
That's an excellent point. And one thing I know, it got brought up in the other sports podcast, but this idea of even the human connection between the student or the student athlete and the coach, how the analytics, how that's coming into play too, of focusing so much and so heavily on analytics versus just the simple like knowledge of the coach and their relationship with the student athlete, what they could actually do in that moment, like under pressure. What does the athlete produce under pressure? So excellent point, Dr. Zen. And I'll open it up. I believe it's Dr. Rick Eckstein now.
I suppose so. Uh, I really didn't have anything for this, but David kicked off something in my head, so thank you for that. I'm there's a double-edged sword with the kind of technology that's increasingly being used to monitor athlete health. There's things called whoops, and that there's probably a all-encompassing term for this, but these kinds of technologies. And my daughter, who played Division III soccer, she used it when she was practicing and when she was playing, but she got to take it off when she left the field. There are programs which require now athletes to wear these technologies 24 hours a day. And we have someone on camera who was talking about and she said, it's good. I can tell if I've slept well or if I haven't, if maybe I'm down on this, I'm in the red zone or the green zone. But the coach also knows what's going on. And the coach would go up to players and say, hey, you didn't sleep last night. What were you doing? Or I saw that you were very active at 2:30 in the morning. Well, what's going on? So these technologies can be both useful and sometimes identifying health risks, but they can also be used as tools of surveillance. And it's that regimentation and sort of militarization of college sports that often leads to or exacerbates the stress and anxiety that's already there when you feel like you're being watched all the time. And you are being watched all the time because you can't take your little wristband off, or else you'll get kicked off the team. So that's a technology that I think it can improve athlete health and both physical and mental, but it needs to be used the right way. It needs to be used correctly.
If I may, real quick, I think that's a fantastic point about the surveillance. And Any technology that's used to make our sports safer, from race cars to football helmets, I think is fantastic. When it starts to be used as surveillance, or again, getting too cute with performance, I don't think I've ever messed up my golf swing more than when I started playing with the toys, at the golf store. That's when it becomes a little more of a detriment.
Excellent points. And Dr. Brooks?
Yeah, I come at this from a little bit of a different direction, I think, than my colleagues here as an athletic trainer and as a strength coach. Um, as the athletic trainer on the sports healthcare side of the equation, this can really help us make either return to play decisions, return to participation decisions. As a strength and conditioning coach, it tells you when to maybe step on the gas and when to maybe pull off or even tap the brakes. Uh, there are a number of programs that use velocity based training and force plate data as tools to adjust the loading that you do on any given day. We see this all the time. I mean, athletes neurologically, I mean, they're in class, they've got relationship drama, financial issues. I mean, there's so many stressors associated with being a college athlete. And some days are better than others. And you come into the weight room and the strength coach has you going at, 96% of your 1RM on a day when you had 3 exams. That's a recipe for disaster. At at best, maybe you don't perform, and at worst, you get injured. So we can use this baseline data. When you set foot in the weight room, we can baseline kind of where you are in terms of readiness, and we can adjust up or down. The flip of that is maybe you've had a great day. Maybe your exams were last week and you're rested and you've had, great workouts, your relationship's great. And maybe we left a PR on the table when we really could have ratcheted it up. And before, all of those decisions were kind of based in the gut. And the thing I love about this technology is it allows us, as coaches, as healthcare professionals, we don't have to abandon our gut. Now we've got data to either support it or to maybe refute it. And so one of my guests on my show, he's now a sports scientist. And he always says, data supported, not data decided. And I love that. He doesn't just look at the data and say, oh, you didn't test well, so you're out today. Uh, but at the same time, it allows him to have more fidelity in the decisions that he's making, as opposed to just kind of this, you know, kind of haphazard, yeah, you look pretty good today. Let's get after it. Everything about training is a fine balance between fitness and fatigue. And rest, I mean, sleep pattern, the Whoop data that we get from not just how many hours did you sleep, how many hours of deep sleep did you get? How many REM cycles did you get? An athlete could have 7 hours of sleep and their teammate had 7 hours of sleep, and it's vastly different in terms of recovery. So I love the fidelity that this can provide, but I definitely understand there are some privacy concerns. There are some ways in which coaches are adding stressors to the equation. If an athlete thinks they're being monitored 24/7, 365, that's not a healthy place to be either.
Very, very good points. And to transition, I really would like to open up the floor to each of you individually to focus maybe where you're. Obviously, we're here, we're talking about sports, but where that area of expertise or that interest really lies. I know we were talking about like conferences where we've met before, extensive research that you all have done. So I would just like to open up and provide you all the opportunity to speak upon sport in your area.
First yet, so maybe it's my turn now. Kids take turns. When you get older, you don't take turns anymore. You're ranked. So we'll go. It's I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not trained about mental illness, but we felt comfortable when we were doing the foundational research for this documentary to just ask the athletes who we surveyed and who we interviewed, what's your stress level on a 1 to 7 scale? Very simple. And then what we did, which I think was novel, was ask them to rank the sources of their stress, not just to list them. And the NCAA does this kind of research. They just open up the floor. Are you this? Are you this? Are you this? Are you this? And people say yes, 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 yes. No, 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 no. We wanted to rank them. We want to see what's really. Not surprised to learn that academics is the chief source of stress for both men and women, and that future plans was the second most common source of stress, both at the college level and the high school level. Kids are always worried about what's next. Right? Young adults are always worried about what's next. But after that is where there was this variation by gender, which we weren't expecting. So for women, sports was right behind future plans as the source of their stress, both in college and in high school, and coaches along with that. For men, sports was way down the list, not even in the top tier of the 10 choices that we gave them. So it led to this exploration of how college sports and even high school sports, but mostly college sports, acts like what we call a total institution. Right? That's a seminal idea within sociology that's been kicked around for 50, 60 years now. And you think about prisons, you think about psychiatric hospitals, you think about the military, where people's lives are controlled every minute of the day, or they don't have any agency whatsoever. And we were seeing that as we talked to athletes initially, and then later on with their filmed interviews, is they had these stories about all these decisions being made for when they were healthy, when they weren't healthy, when they were gonna do this, when they were gonna what they were gonna eat, when they were gonna eat, and we have people who explained when they graduated after 4 years of college sports, they didn't know how to do their own laundry. Well, they didn't know how to make a doctor's appointment because all those things were done for them. And this is a time of life for people who go to college between those ages of say 18 and 23. That's when they really should be exploring and developing this sense of self and making decisions for themselves, some independence, some agency. And athletes are discouraged from doing that all too often. It's not all the time, but all too often decisions are made for them. And so what we're trying to push is that rather than blaming the athletes and their behavior, get more sleep, get rid of the drama in your relationships, whatever it is, put your phone away, don't look at your phone. We think that it's these conditions and structural realities, the way that college sports has been created, the pressure on coaches to win at all costs, the schools that put their whole branding campaigns around sports success. Right? Those are things that athletes have no control over, these 20-year-olds. But this is the system that they've been placed into, and it really produces some unbelievable amounts of stress. When we first got into this, there was, you may all remember, in 2018, 2019, there was a series of suicides by college athletes, mostly women. And, people say, well, why would you do that? You just won a national championship in soccer. How could that happen? Well, it's not just about winning championships. There's all this backstory going on. Life of a college athlete is not as romantic as we see it on ESPN. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Eckstein. And, I think something that's so interesting is when I was on Dr. Brooks' podcast, he literally asked me that when it comes to how everything was so structured, so laid out for you in college. How was that transition? How were the emotions and everything? So I was literally thinking about that. So that's a great transition over to Dr. Brooks.
Yeah, I've definitely seen this in my work. It started pre-COVID, somewhat, but then during COVID, I share the story of kind of how my show got its genesis. We had a behavioral mental health class for my athletic training master students, and we were in remote learning, and they were bored to tears. So I wanted to mix it up. So I convened a panel of former athletes that I had worked with just to talk about their transition out of sport. And I just was not prepared for just the rawness and the unprocessed grief that many of them expressed. One in particular stands out. He's been a manager in professional baseball for 20 years. And he said, nobody ever really asked me this, but I got cut from my team and I drove home in dead silence for 13 hours just thinking about how I've played my last baseball game. This is the only thing I've wanted to do since I was 3 years old, and now it's over. And he just broke down into tears. He's like, I never really thought about how soul crushing that moment was for me. But the thing that has really come from my work with the podcast is it's not just an athlete thing. Many of us have seasons of our life that end, periods of our life that we can't get back. We see this oftentimes in military veterans who, they are a ranking officer on a Friday and they retire, and then they are just average Joe civilian or average Susie civilian on a Monday. And that is a difficult transition to make. Artists, same thing, where I had the drummer from the band Semisonic, and they closed the Grammys one year, and they were out of a record deal the next, playing in venues with 40 participants or 40 fans. And so, I mean, when you have those big transitions in life, I would argue that, yeah, it's sad for athletes, but it's preparing them for real life. And being able to successfully navigate that is a skill. And it's something we as athletic trainers have done a horrible job at, because we're already overscheduled with the athletes we do have. We're not trying to chase down the ones that are out of eligibility to give them support, but that's when they need it. Another thing that happened during COVID that really opened my eyes was Michael Phelps's documentary Weight of Gold, where he talks about the post-Olympic blues and how suicide rates in elite athletes skyrocket after the games when you've got this singular thing, this 2 weeks, or in many cases 1 week, that you've circled on your calendar from the day you were 4 years old as your Olympics, and now it's over. What fills that void? And so it's definitely an awareness piece. And societies, the way we've structured sports medicine just does not support the athlete who is exiting. They got cut from that team. They don't get the access to the healthcare. You know, if you're a member of Team USA and once the Olympics are over and you're no longer a Team USA athlete, where do you go? Unless you've got a job, you don't even have a health insurance. So it's definitely a systemic problem.
Excellent points made. And I'll transition over to Dr. Zen.
First, I'm very impressed with these two gentlemen here, and my research agenda pales in comparison. I will say that my doctorate is in global sport leadership, and I spend a lot of time studying leadership in athletics, whether it's athletic administration or coaching wise. The very first basketball clinic I went to years ago featured Jim Valvano, and he made the statement that coaches don't win championships, administrations do. And at 20 years old, I had no idea what that means, and I'm still not sure I understand. But I got a much better idea of it when I started coaching a small college and Division III, when I realized what I was up against in terms of facilities and access and all those other sorts of things. So that chicken and egg thing, are you good because you have the leader, or are you good because you have the resources? Um, I always found that to be fascinating. I'm also a student of sport geography, access to sport based off of location or interest level or whatever the case may be. I'm convinced that I would have been one heck of a bobsledder, but growing up small town West Virginia, I'll never know. I didn't have access to lacrosse. I didn't have access to soccer based off of my financial status growing up, and also based off of the fact we didn't have it. Hockey was not an option. You played football, you played basketball, and then you ran track to get in shape for football or basketball. So the geography of where these student athletes come from, I find to be pretty fascinating as well.
That is such an interesting topic of discussion. I think about my whole life was gymnastics, so I felt like I didn't even think about like other sports truly. So that's fantastic. And I'm just curious from all of you, what type of advice could you provide? This could be generally speaking, just graduate students or perhaps student athletes exiting maybe their bachelor's degree or even master's degree, like any just general advice that you could offer.
Pass on something. There are schools that are trying to take this transition seriously, trying to give athletes the tools to cope once they're finished. We highlight in the documentary Bowling Green State University, where they've actually have courses that the athletes are required to take to get them ready for, because most of them who are just Division I, but it's low level, and they're not going to be professional athletes for the most part. So you've got to do something. But also they've also at Bowling Green and a couple other schools I've heard of, they allow athletes to take a day off when they want. No questions asked, and there's no limit on it. They may fall behind in conditioning or something, but that's a policy that they have. They need a day off, they get a day off. And the athletes there that we talked to really appreciate it, even if it doesn't have a substantive effect, the psychological effect that the program allows me a little bit of agency to decide when I need a break, when I've got an exam coming up that I really have to study for. And yeah, I'll miss a day of practice and the world will go on. But if I fail my psychology course, that's going to be really detrimental in the long run. I'm also glad to hear that David is a faculty athletic representative, because with some other research that we've been doing, we've actually presented it at CSRI in South Carolina, is that that is a position that is an untapped resource for colleges and universities, and that this position could be used to really aim at advocacy for the athletes rather than just rubber stamping whatever forms that they have to do with recruitment and compliance and all. Uh, and for us, for our perspective, it boils down to how they're selected. Right? Are they selected by the faculty or with significant faculty input, or are they selected by athletic administrators or full campus administrators? And I don't think it's much of an issue at Division III, where there's more of a community, but in Division I, when there are these real strong, almost physical barriers between the academic side and the athletic side, you have people who are selected with absolutely no input from the faculty, who are unknown to the athletes. We found in the surveys that we did that only about a third of all athletes know that this position even exists, and fewer than 20% know who the faculty athletic representative is at their school. That was horrifying to me because of all of my kids being in Division III. They all knew the faculty athletic representative, and I'm sure, David, that you have connections with the athletes, but otherwise it's just this bureaucratic rubber stamp. I think it could really be a help in giving the athletes an independent ear to turn to, rather than going to someone who is either directly affiliated with athletics.
Excellent points. And Dr. Zen?
No, absolutely. I go to great lengths to make sure that the athletes know who I am. But at a Division II school with 900 athletes, I would be disappointed at the results of the survey because I know that they would not name me nearly to the percentage that I would like them to. That said, I do love the role. I love the opportunity to work with our athletes to make sure they're students. I love working with our faculty to make sure our athletes are our students. So it's a valuable role, particularly at the smaller level where you really kind of get into the mix of things and get to know both sides. I would imagine, I don't know, I would imagine the FAR at the University of Tennessee has a completely different job description than I do at a Division II school. Um, but I respect the work that gets done by the FARs.
Zen, and then Dr. Brooks?
Yeah, one thing I'd add to this is I really think it's important for parents to seek out opportunities to put their young athletes into healthy cultures. My son was injured his freshman year, and we are at a 6A high school in Texas, and there were 90 kids that tried out for the freshman baseball team. He made the freshman baseball team, but it was, he was kind of struggling through. And so we really struggled with, do we leave him here and have him, maybe he doesn't get to play, maybe he gets cut, or if he wants to play at a private school, he can do that. And ultimately he made the decision in the midst of rehab to make that jump. And it was the best thing that's probably ever happened for him. I would say that it changed the entire trajectory of his professional ambition. It changed where he went to school. It changed his friends. But more than that, he found himself in a culture that, yeah, they were highly successful athletically, but he emerged, he graduated high school with a perspective that I didn't have. I wanted to play college basketball. And when that didn't shape out the way I wanted it to, I grieved that loss. And I almost felt like, man, do you not care about it? He's like, no, I really enjoyed playing high school baseball, but I want to do other things in college. He kind of understood that it's not his identity. He understood that he could be successful without having to continue to pursue athletic things. Now he'll play, co-ed or rec league or other. I mean, he still loves to play the sport. And to me, that's the best sign. I mean, you guys both mentioned how athletes who have had this kind of seared into their conscience, they can't get away from it fast enough. But an athlete that's been in a healthy culture, they've learned to love to move. They've loved physical activity. It's not tied to can I hit a curveball? It's not tied to, can I dig out that spike in volleyball? It's tied to I love to move and I'll be healthier because of that. He's in the weight room now as a college junior. He's stronger than he's ever been. And now all those seeds were sown in a healthy culture in an athletic environment that was situated properly in context.
So true. And this podcast episode has been absolutely fantastic. We've touched upon different levels of sport, different topics, of course, and I would love to offer the opportunity to kind of go around for some concluding remarks and maybe even things to look out for. Just sports at large. It could be at any level. Well, I'll start with Dr. Rick Eckstein.
What to look out for is almost to put up some of the warning signs that people can see. I'm glad we got to talk about youth sports because I think that's where it starts. And I like Toby's idea of a healthy environment. So much of youth sports is not a healthy environment. And we're talking about 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. There are 3-year-olds who are playing competitive soccer. They're in travel. They're playing for national championships as a 3-year-old. I just got an ad the other day or saw one that they want kids as young as 1. So the age for this soccer club is 1 to 18. So I got a grandson now, and he wasn't even walking at age 1. So he would have been left behind. He never would have made it to the next level because he was late. He was a late walker. So it's insane, and it's not healthy, and it creates these psychological and sociological issues for families and for individuals so that they're not in happy places when they get to be the age of Toby's son. My kids are 30 and 26, and they're still playing sports because they were in those healthy situations. But especially for my younger daughter, who's 26 and was playing soccer, and among other things, she was not specialized, is the youth sports world was really getting crazy when she was in it. And we were able to fend it off and not let it infiltrate our lives. We saw a lot of her friends going down that rabbit hole. And now they don't play soccer, but she's 26 and she's still playing in recreation leagues in Minneapolis. And my older daughter's 31, sorry, and is playing recreational ultimate frisbee and also coaching one of her college teams, ultimate frisbee. And they like to move. I like how you put that, Toby. They like to be active. They enjoy it. They don't associate this kind of activity with these negative issues, with the with loss of identity, with the regimentation. It was always about fun, and it continues to be about fun. And their goal is to be able to play it longer than I did. I had to hang it up at 60. They want to go. They want to go to 65. I think they will, because they want to beat the old man. So it's good motivation. So I like this healthy environment. I think parents need to learn that they don't know everything. They think they do. They think they know what's best, and they don't. Hopefully, the books that we write and the articles that we write and this documentary that we work up, maybe we hope that it'll give parents the encouragement to admit that they don't know very much. And they need to get away from the rhetoric and try to depend on people who have a clear vision of things. And their kids will be better off. So, that's what we all want. We all want our kids to be better off.
Excellent points made. And it reminds me of like being in it for the long run, like you all mentioned, just like the enjoyment of sport maybe at a young age, but then just being able to enjoy movement later on. Maybe it is holding on to the sport, or maybe it's moving on, but you still enjoy that sense of exercise, of health, just in general. You have like a healthy culture and healthy mindset around those topics. So excellent points, Dr. Eckstein. And I'd love to move forward. I know we've been kind of switching it up. I guess I'll switch it up again. So, Dr. Brooks.
Yeah, I think the key for me has been trying to help parents avoid the stigma associated with almost like they're it's like you're on a roller coaster and it's chicking up the hill, and you don't really want to go on this ride, but you feel like you're locked in. And if I don't do this when my kid's 3, they're going to miss out on an opportunity when they're 5, which is going to cause them to miss out on an opportunity when they're 7, which is going to cause them to miss their high school. I mean, there's just this slippery slope of guilt. And I just want parents to understand, if you really want to help your kid be successful in youth sports, plan when they're born. Like, we've got mountains of data that says the kids that are oldest in their age group do better. Okay. If you didn't do that, all right, well, what else could you do? Seek out organizations that are interested not just in the monetization of youth sport, but in the socialization of youth sport and in general physical development. Colleague and I coached our daughters in softball, and we actually did a study on this. Uh, if you look at the data for movement in youth softball, I was at a tournament all day. She played 3 games that day, and I had a stopwatch and I timed when she was doing anything jog or above. And out of that 12-hour day, it was less than 3 minutes of physical activity at a jog or above. Okay, well, that's way different than maybe soccer would be. I get that. But we recognize that parents who are putting their kids into youth sports think that it's fitness. Well, what happens? They do 3 minutes of physical activity, and then they get a Gatorade and a sugary snack at the end. They're actually calorie positive. This is not a fitness strategy, right? This is an obesity strategy. So my colleague and I, he's a physical therapist, I'm an athletic trainer. We said, we're going to coach our girls differently. And between innings, when they came off, we actually had them doing agility drills down the baseline for a couple of minutes, hops and stops and lateral movement and karaoke. And when we first did it, the parents thought we were insane. But the girls, they pushed back initially, but they really grew to love it. And we looked at their landing skills, and we know female athletes are 5 to 10 times more likely to tear their ACL than their male counterparts. And a lot of that is neuromuscular. And we're thinking, if they're coming to play sport and they're not acquiring neuromuscular skills, then we've done them a disservice. We can make this more fun. We can protect them from injury. And in the process, they're better protected. So there are ways that we can maybe dovetail some of these skills into existing things and make it better.
Wonderful points. And I'm glad that you highlight even the nutrition. And maybe that's for part 2 we could dive into, Dr. Brooks. But Dr. Zen, would love to hear your insights and concluding remarks.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. You asked the question what to watch out for, and all three of us went straight to parents. Um, I know parental over involvement when I was coaching NCAA Division III is one of the reasons that I teach sport management now. That was something I just did not want to deal with, and got to the point in my career that I was just over. When parents are calling the president wanting to know why so and so is not getting more playing time at the college level, come to practice. I'll show you why she's not playing. Um, yeah, but just I think the parental issues are a concern. I don't know if it comes to education or if it's the nature of our business. Being sports. Got everybody at the grocery store and at the gym and every place else right now. They're experts in soccer. They've watched the World Cup for a week, and now everybody knows everything there is to know about soccer. Every adult male I have ever met knows how to cook a steak and coach a basketball team. So I think when you have that parental over involvement, you know, it lends itself to issues. So I don't know if it's more education or whatever the case may be. I made the decision a long time ago. I would be the quietest sport parent at the field, and I rarely say a word because I want my daughters to be coached by the coaches. They've got a job to do. I try to stay out of the way until it crosses a line into things that we don't want to talk about. Um, but I really think that parents need to understand that to their point, um, you're it's unlikely that you're raising the next starting quarterback at Notre Dame, and you don't know that when they're 1 years old. I had a coach show me, a letter that they had gotten. Hey, my kid is large for their age. They're going to make a great lineman. And here's the picture, and it was a sonogram. So we hadn't even gotten to one yet. Um, so I think a reality check for parents, whether it's orientation program or meetings or just an understanding of what the purpose of the program is, the purpose of the team is, I think is really, really vital to maybe lay off the kids a little bit.
wonderful points. And I would love to do this again. So grateful for all of the time to come on to the podcast and to share your expertise. Truly grateful for that. And we will conclude here. So thank you so much.